You know what's messed up? It's actually been kind of cold lately. And it's been raining. Not like a hot, steamy summer rain, but a cold autumn drizzle, which, you know, I appreciate, but it's kind of unexpected. So after my whole tirade about how I'm worried that it's gonna be too hot on the day of the Ren Fair, it somehow never occurred to me that it might actually be cold. To be fair to me, it's going to be 26 degrees, bright summer sun tomorrow, so anything is a possibility at this point. So in the last video, I made a whole medieval maiden outfit so that it can go with the star of the show, Pippin the Singing Rat. Also, I'm thinking about changing the name to Perry because it just sounds easier to say. Perry the Rat. Yeah. And as a reminder, I'm planning to make a little costume for him, as well as little instruments like a tambourine and a little lute of some sort. Baby! Sorry, my cat is asking to be let out. And now the time has come for me to actually make this rat. Hi, my name is Emily, and I am an amateur puppet maker. Doll maker? I'm not sure what this constitutes as. So as you may be able to tell from this footage, I accidentally started recording everything in slow-mo, so allow me to explain. I thrifted this furry brown fabric for $4 a while back, thinking it'd probably be useful someday, and today was that day. I also dug out this crinkly pink fabric out of my stash for the ears and tails and lining. And here I am explaining that I couldn't just make a sock shape for Perry the Rat puppet because it lacked detail and wasn't cute, so I got to mocking up some pattern pieces. So I just realized that I've been recording everything on slow-mo so far. Anyway, I'm drawing the patterns out on paper right now because I feel just confident enough that it'll work, but also not confident enough to cut it out on the actual fabric yet. So we have back, front, and the inside of the mouth, and we can do another mock-up with these. It was at this point that I realized I basically just made an oven mitt, two if you count the one I made in slow-mo, and neither of them were cute. So I abandoned those mock-ups and tried to drape my own hand to hopefully get something more structured and less ugly, but I pretty quickly realized that wasn't going to work either. I'll be real, I didn't really expect making a rat hand puppet to be so hard. I mean, I've made dolls on this channel before, but they're all math-based and geometric. I haven't really gotten the hang of curved shapes. So when I call myself an amateur doll maker, I'm not kidding. I really am such an amateur at it. Why do I have so many frog puppets? This is a shark, Jellycat London, and I think maybe I can use this as a base for my rat. I think it'll fit my hand. Let me check. Yeah? Good size? Alright, little shark, you're gonna become my model. And then the shark underwent a very intensive skincare routine, which involved me smothering it with fabric. I pulled it as flat as possible and traced where the seams were with a Sharpie, which was a very questionable choice, and ended up with these pattern pieces. So here are all my pattern pieces, and I think what I'm going to do for the rat is I'm going to make the snout and the top of the snout separate, and then just add an inner mouthpiece, maybe along halfway down the snout, so that it can just open and close a little. I hope that'll work. Now I'm going to clean these up and make yet another mock-up. The belly piece is the most unsymmetrical piece of them all, so I'm not sure which side I'm supposed to follow. I think this side is right. Here you can see me making sure the pattern pieces are the same length, and then once again I used my trusty tape wrapped die to mark out the ½ seam allowance. I lost my scissors, please hold. And then it was time for the next mock-up, and by mock-up I mean the lining fabric because I wanted to see results. And besides, much like the dress, if I mess up, at least it'll be on the inside. This fabric, however, is extremely flimsy. It's actually the same kind of fabric I used for my toilet paper doll, so first I had to attach some iron-on interfacing to it. Sides, belly, jaw. And now I'm going to try sewing this together and see if it works. Sewing together the back first. And now I think I sew together the top of the belly and the bottom of the jaw. And now I'm going to attach the sides to the thing we just sewed together. But when we get towards the tip of the nose, I'm going to stop maybe 2 or 3 inches away from the tip to leave some room for the mouth. I'm not sure why the sides are sticking out here because I did measure all of the corresponding sides to make sure they're the same measurement. But I mean, otherwise it fits if I finagle a little bit, so hopefully it'll be okay. I think this looks less like a mouse and more like an eel, maybe a worm. So I was feeling pretty frustrated and discouraged with this project yesterday, so I called it an early day and I went out. And I went to the thrift store and they sold me a bunch of these little Lego things for 10 cents. We have a box, we have a boxer, we have this knight, scuba diver, and the alien thing from Indiana Jones 4. And also this wrench, but this is unrelated. And now that my head is much clearer and I don't feel like I want to tear my puppet apart, here's the plan for today. I'm going to... Where's my puppet? Make just a few changes to this so that its body is less wormular and more curvy, like a nice rotund rat. And I'm going to cut out the modified pattern pieces on the furry fabric. And if that ends up not working out, then I'll just make it a regular puppet with a non-moving mouth. With all that squared away, I began modifying the pattern, which involved shortening the length by a couple inches and adding some darts to achieve the rounder shape I so desired. Trying on the puppet was like entering a saw trap, by the way. Oh yeah, and you'll see in this clip that I added the mouthpiece, which didn't make it look any less like an eel. But anyway, I transferred those modifications to the paper pattern pieces. And also added a notch to remember where to leave space for the open mouth. So it's time to cut out these pattern pieces on the furry fabric. But before we do that, we have to apply interfacing to the furry fabric. But one thing I really hate about using this interfacing is just how ginormous it is. But luckily for me, I happen to also have this fabric roller thing from the same store. So I'm just going to really quickly roll the interfacing around this so that I won't feel a sense of dread every time I have to break out my interfacing. Every time I buy interfacing from Michaels, you know, those tiny purple packs, I feel like I never have enough, and yet I'm spending so much money on it. So, life hack, buy interfacing by the meter at your local fabric store. And with that all sorted, we can finally get to cutting that furry fabric. To preserve the furriness as much as possible, I laid a towel down first and only applied medium pressure to the iron. This does mean that the interfacing has a slightly weaker bond to the fabric, but not to the point that it's unworkable, so it's fine. And then I just put the pieces together the same way I did the lining. Good news, the edges line up perfectly here now. Reminder of what it looked like before. Now we attach the mouth to the rest of it. I think it'll be less bulky once I trim off the excess seam allowance inside, but so far, I think it looks like a rat, kind of. It'll really look like a rat once I actually add the ears and eyes and stuff. So it's been a few days. This is where we left off, vague blob, and I figure it's finally time to add some facial features so that I can feel like I'm going in the right direction. So I've dug out a variety of doll eyes that we could work with. Googly eyes, big brown doe eyes, semi-flat eyes, and I also found this little brown nose, which I thought would be really cute. Looks like a bean. In the end, I decided to go with the semi-round black eyes, which I simply glued on, and to prep the puppet for the nose, I stabbed a hole in the snout seam. And then it was time to make the ears. I decided to hand stitch the ears because the idea of feeding such tight curves through the machine was painful. Then I flipped it right sides out,
closed up the bottom and glued on the ears, although later I had to reinforce them with thread.
So now the ears are all secured, and for the inside of the mouth, I'm going to be using some felt. While Perry is drying over there, I figure we should figure out what exactly its costume should be. I definitely want the pointed ruffles with bells at the end, or little pom-poms if I have any that small, and definitely a hat with 2 of the droopy cone things on the sides and a row of bells on a crest all the way down the back of the head. I'm not sure if I need to do more for Perry's costume because he is quite small. I guess we'll do these first and see how it goes.
Aside from those 2 costume pieces, I also decided to add mismatched shoes, much like this reference image, and some frills to make up for the fact I still don't have frilly socks of my own. It's hit the point in a crafting project where I feel like my room is way too messy for me to focus on anything, so please hold. I began with the pointy collar. After figuring out a paper pattern, I cut it out on that velvety green fabric that I introduced in the last video but never used. I didn't realize how much Kermit this green collar would give, but it's giving Kermit. Anyway, I cut 2 of them, pinned them right sides together, and sewed. I pre-marked the seam allowance because I find with super curved or complex shapes, this helps give a cleaner result. Then I trimmed the allowances down, clipped the curves and points, and flipped the whole thing inside out. Finally got it all turned inside out and poked out all the little itty-bitty points so that they're nice and crisp. Sorry, this is backlit. I should get better lighting in here. Anyway, I'm gonna go try this on the rat. Oh, so cute! Look at this little lizard action he's got going on. Now I just have to seal up this end and then attach ribbons to the ends so that I can tie it together. He's such a dapper little guy.
So I was going to attach little bells all along the edges of his collar, but I feel like that might be a little too jingly. So instead, I was thinking I could use these little golden beads instead. Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
Perry looks a lot cuter when I'm not puppeting him.
So it is the next morning. This is an extrapolated view of what I planned for the hat. The 2 cones, the crest down the middle, all attached to this cap in the middle. And luckily for me, I just happen to have 2 green velvet circles from when I made the collar yesterday. I think if I just pinch together this little accidental dart here, it'll create a nice little 3D shape that looks like a cap. What a coincidence.
Now I need to make the cones that come out the sides of it. And for that, I've dug out the leftover fabric from the maiden dress I made. I only ended up using 1 of the 2 sheets of fabric I bought. There should be plenty for me to make little cones. Making the cones was relatively easy. I just made a pizza slice, sewed up one side, turned it inside out, and voila! Cone. I basted the seam allowance so I wouldn't have to guesstimate, and let me try this new transition. Now to attach some bells to the end of them. I feel like I need to glue down the cones a little maybe. I wish I'd put some kind of wire or pipe cleaner in here so I can shape them, but it's a little too late now. For the crest, I decided to use yellow felt and opted not to put bells or beads on them because I didn't want it to be too much.
So I'm kind of tired of only making clothes so far, so I'm gonna shift gears a bit and start making the tambourine. And for that, we have almost completely used up roll of tape, some very thin grayish faux leather. Of course, we need bells for the sides. And also, for the edge of the tambourine, I was thinking we could use this red leather, if you remember this from miniature book video. The circumference should work out. Because it's literally just such a tiny gap. Okay, I found this other almost used up tape roll. This one does still have a bit on it, so I'm just gonna wrap this somewhere else to be used later and steal the middle part.
To make the drum of the tambourine, I traced 2 circles onto the faux leather, cut them out, and then E6000 them onto the tape core. While waiting for that to dry, I cut out the side trim out of the red leather, and to prep it for the bells, punctured a bunch of holes in it with the trusty awl and mallet.
This is a self-healing mat, but I feel like even self-healing mats have their limits. Leatherworkers, feel free to let me know what material I'm supposed to be putting on the bottom.
I decided to mix and match the colors of the bells and then simply sewed them on.
So I added little jump rings, and I also added some more beads to fill up the little gaps between the bells because I just felt like it was too sparse, but also I didn't want to add more bells.
And then all I had to do was glue the bedazzled trim onto the drum.
So I was out on a supply run for an upcoming video, popped by the thrift store, and I found a bunch of goodies. A bunch of cute little frames. I print little cat pictures and sell them at art markets and stuff. Big quilt cover. I need the brownie beige fabric for something secret. Green floral fabric. I feel like it'd be useful for something. And then afterwards, I found this beautiful flower lamp. Look at this lily pad base. Long, slender golden neck leading up to this glass flower shade. I love it, and now it is mine. And you know, I was complaining that it was too dark in my work area over there, so I was thinking maybe I can put this up there. Is that too weird? Alright, let's see how this goes. Ooh, my beautiful lamp illuminating my workspace. This concludes my lamp saga. Now let's go back to my work.
The top of the tambourine was looking a little too bare, so I glued on some more golden beads, and to hide the raw edges of the leather, I used some pearl trim.
Now that this is drying, I'm gonna get started working on the lute. I'm going to be using the other tape roll that's slightly bigger, the popsicle stick, some basswood.
The original plan was to use basswood for both sides, but unfortunately when I tried to drill a hole through it, it kind of exploded, so I pivoted to using craft foam for the top.
Oh, I cut right on where the tag is.
For the neck, I used a good old popsicle stick, and for the headstock, which I only learned the name of because of this video, I was originally going to use foam as well, but I decided to look through my trinket stash.
And I found this sunburst thing, and I thought that would look really cute. Yeah, that looks cool. So this is what it would look like. Before we can assemble these things though, we do have to paint them.
Now here was where I made a mistake. I was so excited to paint that I forgot I should prime the surfaces first with my new spray primer that I bought specifically for projects like this. This wasn't a problem for the most part except for the tape roll, which was a vinyl electrical tape of some sort that really did not take the paint very well, but I couldn't remove it because it would rip up the cardboard underneath. But in my refusal to stop painting now that I had already started, I pushed on. I painted the front a light warm tan and the back and neck a deep, rich brown. I also added fake wood grain and left a spot unpainted for where the neck would glue onto the body.
So all the components of the lute are painted. I added wood grain to the face and also to the back right here. Looks kind of like a wooden watermelon. To the neck also. I'm a little worried about how sticky some of the acrylic is. Update on that shadow doll that I repainted a while back. He is very sticky. He is so sticky that I'm afraid to touch him. So I'm kind of concerned that this might be undergoing the same process. I don't know what process that is, but apparently acrylic paint doesn't like being layered over certain substances.
I should mention that it was only sticky where the electrical tape was. To cut down the tackiness, I decided to Mod Podge the whole thing because I was afraid the varnish on its own wouldn't be enough, considering how sticky shadow is despite the varnish.
Should I gloss the gem in the middle too? Okay.
I also painted on the frets with silver paint. I'm going to let the glue fully dry before I spray it with varnish, and in the meantime, we can pivot back to Perry here. We need to make arms, legs, and a tail, and since I'm feeling a little lazy this morning, let's start with the tail so that we can hopefully reawaken my crafting senses. God, how's my table so messy again?
Turning this tail inside out is basically impossible because of how skinny it gets. I got about halfway through and I think this is good enough.
Perry officially has a tail. And then it was time for the feet, but before then I sewed down one side of the hat cones because I thought the asymmetry was super cute, and then this was how I made the feet. The arms were made in a similar fashion, but with the furry fabric and with pipe cleaners inside so Perry could hold the lute exactly the way I wanted him to. Then I basted all those components onto Perry, and he is so close to being finished. But popping back to the lute for a second, happy with how unsticky it now was, I sprayed it with varnish and then strung it with some white thread tied to a toothpick painted silver. I glued on the headstock, topped it off with a pearl, and then added loops so that I could string it onto a chain. I attached the clasp onto the tambourine loops and clipped that onto the chain as well. And with that, Perry is almost ready to rock and roll. I mean, lute and lament. But the last major step was attaching the lining, which has still been in its warm form this entire time, but I trimmed it down, modified it according to the new patterns, and sewed it on, and ta-da! Try not to think about what you're looking at right now.
I can't get over how cute he is. He's such a fancy little lad, decked out in his little instruments.
And now some finishing touches. I added gold trim and pearls around his booties, the same gold lace around his arms, maybe wrote a little song for him, and then we are ready for the final reveal.
I'm a mousie on the street, looking for some food to eat. Threading through the thundering feet, faces pallid as a sheet. There is something in the air. Heed your distance or despair. It's the plague, 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 it's the plague.
No! As you may have seen, unfortunately Perry's lute chain did fall off when he ejected from the tree. It's just taped on right now. So before I go to the event, I do have to get that fixed. And I also realized that this dress having no pockets is such a hassle. I'm not sure how much footage I will get of the event itself. It might rain that day, which is why I'm wearing a thermal shirt underneath this dress right now. I'll have my hands full with Perry in one hand and an umbrella in the other, presumably. But I hope you like the process of watching me make Perry the rat. Ba, ba, ba. He's very excited to meet every other attendee at the Ren Fair. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Say bye, Perry. Bye!